In this video we're going to go through some of the news in tabletop role-playing games for the month of June. I also released a playtest document for my game Machineborn that you can find a link to in the description below. I am going to talk a little bit more about that game closer to the end of the video, but first... Hunters Entertainment launched a successful Kickstarter for a game called Alice is Missing, which is a silent role-playing game. The game is about the disappearance of high school junior Alice Briarwood, and the players are role-playing through the experience entirely by text messages. Apart from being a silent role-playing game, the game mechanics borrow more aspects from board games than traditional tabletop RPGs. There's no official GM, for example. Instead, one of the players adopts the role of a facilitator, which means that they're both a player character and a rules reference. Each player draws a character card instead of creating their own, and they all use a voice recording app to record their character's last voicemail to Alice. The characters then set out to find clues about their whereabouts while texting each other. While the game is creative and drew a lot of attention, it appears to me that the texting aspect and the fact that two player characters never meet each other in the game kind of diminishes the social aspect of roleplay. It relies heavily on board game elements, which is a good way to get quick games up and running without the need for prep time. The silent text messaging is probably not my cup of tea, because I think the best thing about role-playing games is that they are social experiences. But I would be interested in trying it out at some point if given the chance. If you want to learn more about the game, there's a link below to Becca Scott's rundown of how it works. After the public execution of George Floyd and the protests that follow, the month of June can be defined by a strong international fight for racial justice and equality. Tabletop role-playing has a very diverse community, and many publishers, content creators and even fans themselves have wanted to support the Black Lives Matter movement by supporting content made by people of color. DM's Guild had a BLM spotlight with a number of items and bundles. Drive-Thru RPG had a spotlight of their own where they pushed games such as Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk. Probably the most impressive of them all were Itch.io's Gargantuan bundle, where you could get over 1,000 products for only $5, and which raised more than $8 million that all went to the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund as well as the Community Bail Fund. Unfortunately, the sales and spotlights are over, but that doesn't mean that you have to stop supporting the content creators or donate to the organizations. And when we're on the topic of Black Lives Matter, Origins, one of the largest tabletop gaming conventions in the world, was first postponed due to the pandemic, but now cancelled altogether. The reason for this is because their organizers GAMA, the Game Manufacturers Association, didn't make an official statement that Black Lives Matter, prompting participants and companies to pull from the event. GAMA later released a statement in favor of the BLM movement and apologized for not making that statement earlier and with enough force. They announced that it would be inappropriate for them to hold the event and offered full refunds as well as donations to a number of organizations such as the BLM Global Network. Jeremy Crawford, principal rules designer of Dungeons & Dragons and lead designer of the Player's Handbook, announced on Twitter early June that Wizards of the Coast were intending for a more diverse approach to the D&D races going forward, dropping the evil alignment from orcs as an example. This was later followed up by an official statement by Wizards of the Coast where they went into depth about their inclusivity plans going forward. They say, one of the explicit design goals of 5th edition D&D is to depict humanity in all its beautiful diversity by depicting characters who represent an array of ethnicities, gender identities, sexual orientations and beliefs. We want everyone to feel at home around the game table and to see positive reflections of themselves within our products. Human in D&D means everyone, not just fantasy versions of Northern Europeans, and the D&D community is now more diverse than it's ever been. They go on to present a number of different ways they aim to make changes going forward. The most recent books, Eberron, Rising from the Last War, and The Explorer's Guide to Wildmount, depict orcs as more morally and culturally complex than before, and they aim to continue that trend. They're also going to make corrections to reprints of earlier material, such as Tomb of Annihilation and The Curse of Strahd. The latter in particular depicts a people known as the Vistani, which echoes Romani stereotypes. Wizard of the Coast has worked with a Romani consultant in order to better represent the Vistani people. It's common practice for RPG publishers nowadays to include sensitivity readers whenever they are making depictions with real-life connotations in order to make sure the text remain inclusive. This brings us to the next piece of Dungeons & Dragons news, namely the new D&D adventure Icewind Dale: Rime of the Frostmaiden, which was announced on Wizards of the Coast's charity event hosted by Anna Prosser and Micah Burton. This is a levels 1 to 12 horror adventure focused on Auril, one of the evil goddesses of the Forgotten Realms. Despite the mention of sensitivity readers and inclusivity in the press release, Wizards of the Coast has already received some flack for the representation of women in this adventure. The reason for that is because of the names of Auril's 3 forms, the Cold Crone, the Brittle Maiden and the Winter's Womb. These names are a reference to the Maiden, the Mother and the Crone from folklore, and is causing some controversy because they are making Auril's womanhood her defining feature. However, despite the controversy surrounding these names, the adventure seems to be, for the most part, well received by the community. With tools such as Fantasy Grounds, Roll20, Astral Tabletop and D20 Pro, there are ways for role players to connect and play online. A new such product called Roll has had a successful Kickstarter this month, and Ian World's Egg Embry had an interview with Roll CEO Logan Dwight where they talked about the system. Logan points out that they wanted Roll to focus differently from the other systems out there. He says, "Our primary features are not designed around complex battle maps, database management and encounter builders. We asked ourselves, what's the most common delightful thing every game has in common regardless of rules or complexity level? The answer to us was obvious. It's the joy of playing with great people and seeing their reactions on their faces as you tell a story together." He goes on to explain how Roll is a video-centric play tool with a play interface that's designed like a video call but that has RPG essentials built into the frame. Another focus Roll has is to help people get together and form new groups, but the intimate nature of RPGs make it impractical to have a video game style lobby. Logan goes on to say, "What we landed on is almost like a dating app, but instead of dating you're meeting players like you. Our player matching service will allow people to surface optional information about their tastes, playstyle, rule complexity they like, GM experience and favorite games. From there, they'll be able to match with other players whose profiles have similar interests. If 2 players both choose to connect, they can then chat, schedule game sessions together and hopefully build meaningful relationships. We want Roll to be more than just an online tabletop. It should be a place for the community to gather and forge lasting friendships." There's still a lot of development needed and additional features will be added to the system after it's been released. Right now the focus has been more on the video-centric aspect of the system, which means that it's no good for tactical battle maps and such, but Logan points out that they'll add and improve such features as they go. Kickstarter backers are expected to get early access to the tools by the end of the year. The online RPG tool Roll20 is releasing Bryte on July 7. This is a game specifically designed for their platform. It's a science fiction game that takes place on the spaceship Olaxis Galaxy, a place of tenacious creatures and magic powered tech. The game's mechanics are designed to fully utilize Roll20's features. The announcement states, Bryte uses the power of Roll20 to let players roll fistfuls of dice with instant resolution, build super customizable characters with unique backstories in a matter of seconds, apply automated conditions to creatures with a click of a button, track shared resources, run white-knuckle spaceship battles with every player participating in a meaningful way, customize a spaceship together, roll on random tables instantly without flipping through pages, and do so much more. Roll20 has announced an upcoming actual play of Bryte on their Twitch channel. A new podcast named The Systematic Understanding of Everything, an Exalted podcast, released its first episode on June 16 and its second episode on June 29. The first episode is named Opening the Mind's Gate, What's Exalted, and it gives a quick-paced but thorough introduction to Exalted 3rd edition. The cast of the podcast is Exalted developer Monica, Shaz of the Storytold podcast, and Terry, who was mostly listening. Since I think that the more Exalted content there is, the better the world is, I encourage you to check out the link in the description below. Machineborn is a science fiction game taking place several centuries in the future, one generation after a violent war that brought nearly all of civilization to the brink of destruction. The game is based on a Wizards of the Coast open game license, though its current iteration is quite crunchy with a lot of customization options. The game is not properly balanced and the rules need to be streamlined some more, and that's the reason for this playtest. It's currently 358 pages and contains all the necessary material to create characters and play the game. However, there is still some material that will be available for the final product, but that's not available in the playtest. One such thing is a more extensive setting chapter that delves deeper into the major factions as well as noteworthy locations and NPCs. The final book will also have a narrator chapter that hasn't been written so far. I aim to write this chapter after the playtesting is done, when I have more information about how the game plays. The playtest doesn't have a character sheet either. Also, the book doesn't have chapter fiction, a lexicon, and it's not indexed or bookmarked, which I learned now in hindsight that I should probably have done. Some things to keep in mind when reading the playtest is that it's a playtest. The game is expected to have issues, and I've already learned about a number of them that will be edited for future playtest documents. I'm looking for feedback on things that are missing, things that can be improved, things that don't work or aren't fun, etc. Also, since I've written everything myself, there ought to be poorly written sections. I'm already aware of quite a few sections in the document that should be rewritten for clarity. So, what I'm looking for from you is feedback on the playtest document. I want feedback on everything from the writing to the structure, the content and the rules. There's information on how you can send that feedback to me in the document, as well as on the link to the document that you can find in the description. I will credit you in the book if you want to be credited, even if you only send a little bit of feedback and even if it isn't heeded. As long as you've taken some time to send me feedback, regardless of what it is, I'll be willing to credit you in the book. If you like what you see in the playtest document and want to follow along the process, you can sign up for my Patreon for only $1 a month. That will give you access to all previews for the Machineborn core book. I intend to release both playtest errata and new previews there every month before I make new versions available to the public. Patrons are also credited in the book in the order of which they contributed. You don't have to be a patron in order to access the game after it's been released, but you can become one for only $1 a month if you want to give some extra support. And speaking of Patreon, I have launched 4 new support tiers. So far we've had a $1 human tier, which gives access to previews and polls, and a $5 transhuman tier, which also gives access to video manuscripts. The new $10 executive tier gives access to the same as the transhuman tier, but the patrons' names will be highlighted in every YouTube video. The limited $25 world coder tier have access to all previous tiers, and they may suggest video content, written content, or request feedback on content every month. The limited $50 cosmic tier functions the same as the world coder tier, but they may also request non-RPG related content, longer written content, and request feedback on more material. Because of NDAs with Onyx Path, I can't make Exalted homebrew using this system, but I can make Exalted videos based on your suggestions, and I can also take a look at your Exalted content and your homebrew and provide feedback on that. Finally, there's a $100 Machineborn tier that functions similar to the Cosmic Coder tier, but where the patron may choose to have a personal role-playing session of 3 to 5 hours GM'd by yours truly. This could be for any game I'm comfortable GMing, such as D&D, Exalted or Machineborn. I don't really expect people to jump onto these more expensive tiers anytime soon, but the $1 a month for the Machineborn previews is enough to make a difference. So if any of this seems interesting to you, I recommend that you check out my Patreon. Also, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe if you like this video and want to see more. Until next time.